Due to the upwards momentum, you're not able to jump, like talking about. Can John make that gap? That's what I'm gonna have to try out next. Yes, he can. I was worried for nothing.
This is James. He's another one of my favourite characters. He's intended to be the opposite of Thomas. He's kind of the anti-Thomas. This is something that lots of games do, and have the negative version of their main character. He's not evil. He's not mean in that way, but he's emotionally, hopefully, kind of the opposite. He's uncomfortable with the world. He's scared of the world. He's kind of He's not a massive fan of groups of people either. It's established very early on that maybe he was bullied or he's uncomfortable around others. So hopefully kind of the complete inverse Thomas, which will become interesting when they meet. It's quite nice as well that he's physically the opposite of Thomas in terms of that he falls upwards, that he's got the anti-gravity. It's a nice way of bringing that mechanic in. And then little things like the fact that he's the opposite RGB value, which is a minor little nerdy thing to do, but one person in the world would realise prior to this commentary, and that's important, and that makes me feel clever at parties. I don't go to parties, I'm a game designer.
Interesting. I may turn him down just a little bit. It's like maybe like 70. Okay. I have him at 70, I have the commentary at 50. At the FX at 40. And then boom, there you go. So I guess this would be like episode 5, depending on how you look at it. Okay, so that's why this is here. So I can jump on that. It's all the way over here to begin with. So I actually need to get up here. Aha, secrets. Yeah, I'll get 1 hour. 30 more minutes of it, that's to say. Going right, my controller has no problem, but going left is annoying.
And that's obviously from a gameplay point of view, that's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used. All the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view, that's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels she's a superhero, which is cool. And with James, I really wanted him to have a different reaction to his differentness. He feels different in a way that's uncomfortable. He feels that he's weird and odd and strange, and that makes him uncomfortable around people. And that's a valid response to feeling different, and it's one that you see a lot in the real world. And I kind of wanted to play with that kind of negative. All the characters are different in this game, and that's obviously from a gameplay point of view, that's sort of the point, that they're different. And I like that different characters react to that difference differently. So Laura finds it hard to trust people because she feels she's being used because she's different. John is proud of his difference and feels much better than everyone else. Claire, her self-esteem is boosted by her difference. She feels she's a superhero, which is cool. And with James, I really wanted him to have a different reaction to his differentness. He feels different in a way that's uncomfortable. He feels that he's weird. I really wanted to start building in more complex environment interactions at the
I actually like what he's saying, but I'm going to get too focused on it if I continue with it. Turn the music back up a little bit.
And you were immediately saw the kind of the output, the payoff of that. With this stuff, this is more indirect. So this is you're getting knocked by one thing into another thing, which is dangerous. So it's a nice little, two-step interaction, which feels good and hopefully varies things up. Also, here the player's still disoriented. Players don't get used to the gravity when it's anti-gravity quite as fast as before. Also, obviously, they've played the game up to this point, so they're still in that original mode. So it's quite fun putting them in this situation which requires them to time something and time placement, because they are slightly disoriented by the environment they've been put
It's okay. I'll listen to
into,
his commentary.
and I have a little bit of fun at their expense as a result. And it's fun. It's a lot like that challenge earlier on with Claire. We had to unlearn the fact that you carried things across. Here you have to kind of relearn gravity and your relationship to it in order to proceed, and that's cool that players kind of struggle because of a learned skill that they have to kind of unlearn, rather than the fact that the game's challenging. I like that. And this is where Thomas comes back. I really ummed and ahed about how long I was going to leave it before you saw one of the original characters again. I was kind of worried that I wanted the loss to set in. I wanted the player to feel they missed those characters, but at the same time I kind of had to get it going again. And I didn't want to introduce these other world characters quite too quickly. I wanted to save Sarah, for example, for later. So bringing in Thomas at this point felt right. It kind of felt like the logical time. James has been established. The players got used to the fact that those characters are gone. So Thomas is a surprise. Here, I keep them separated, but it's for a slightly different reason than before. It's not to limit the player or make them feel constrained so that the later kind of access to the characters is more fun. It's mainly to introduce anti-gravity and gravity simultaneously. In most games, when you change gravity, the gravity change is either directed by the player at a thing they want to change the gravity of, or it's universal, so everything falls upwards. So there's a chance that players at this point in the game, because they've only seen James on the screen and he's new, they don't make the leap that James has different gravity to everyone else. They might just assume this is an anti-gravity world. So having Thomas separated off with the correct gravity in a way that they can see, just kind of hopefully explains James's power in a way that they might have missed.
Just turned that voiceover volume like 90. So definitely slow down my page a little bit.
To actually try and make these characters interact.
Just turn that voiceover volume like 90. Oh, you guys really can't hear him anymore.
I love this level. It's awesome. It's kind of jazzy. It's a playful environment. The aim here was to get things moving around, get blocks moving in quite a fun, silly way, and change the environment in a way that's not been done before. Kind of these constant tweaks and fiddles to make everything feel odd and changing. So this is the first time the player has to use these two characters together in a puzzle. It's actually quite a long way into this chapter before you're required to do that. This is the first time. And you use them to stepping stone each other. Part of the reason for doing this is actually to begin the player's journey towards a much more complex mechanic, which is the idea of having the two characters standing on top of each other and basically negating each other's gravity, which is something that they come to later. There's quite a few levels where I kind of create these situations where you either half do it, i.e. a stepping stone, or you might accidentally do it, which is hopefully going to happen a few times. Players are going to accidentally find themselves floating in space, and it's nice because I see a lot of Let's Plays or YouTube comments where people are like, "Oh, I totally broke this level by getting the fact that you could do that on top of each other, these two characters on top of each other, way earlier than the designer intended." I always intended you to work it out, and I intended for you to feel clever when you did. Sorry to burst your bubble. You're a lovely person, and I'm sure you're very, very good at computer games. But that's the intention, is hopefully that these two characters being put in this situation will kind of guide you on your own to find what is probably the most complex concept to grasp in the game.
I actually really like that mechanic.
So this is another indirect level. This is a level where the two characters are not kind of directly interacting with each other. There's a symmetry as well. There's basically both characters going on almost the same moves. There's a few different variations just to keep it interesting, but predominantly they're progressing in exactly the same way. This is something I couldn't do very often. A symmetrical level with two characters doing exactly the same thing would not be very entertaining if it was done lots and lots and lots. but aesthetically I just love the symmetry of this level, and I kind of wanted to have at least one level where I kind of acknowledge the fact that the characters are the same in terms of their jump heights, for example, and actually make a level where you're playing 2 levels simultaneously. Like I said, only something I can't do. It's not something I can do very often, but it was a nice thing to do just this once.
Wish there was a way you can move both of the characters at the same time. This is kind of tedious. I'm just gonna go under the area, seeing as I found both the things already. Just why not? Definitely an interesting platformer so far. Question.
This was
I can just...
James and Thomas working together could get anywhere. James didn't seem to understand the immense ability he possessed.
Okay, I can just make the jump for both of them. Instead of trying to use some super cheese, just go on underneath the level. James is dead. Just take my time. I say as I... Okay.
Thomas wondered why the cloud thing had brought them both here.
Is this a new area? I don't believe it is. Zoom out just a little bit. See. Nope. Nothing there.
And this is taking that stepping stone idea a little bit further. So this is the idea that you can this is the idea you can use one character to move another, to act as a stepping stone for another, to help with jump distance. I think this level, there's a bit of bad communication going on with the moving platforms. The point of moving platforms is essentially to catch you if you get a character past the point where they're useful. There's certain places where you can break this level theoretically by moving the wrong character too far. And those moving platforms are kind of a way of backing out of that so you can get back into the game without dying. What the problem is, though, is up to this point all moving platforms are there to be jumped on. So players see the moving platform and immediately assume that's part of the solution to the problem, which is a problem with this level, and I've seen people get confused by it. It's an odd one because partially that's kind of cool because it means that it's a puzzle for them to work out, but also I think players feel a little bit cheated. They feel like they've been told to do something that didn't work. So that's one that I would probably tweak if I was doing it again.
Yeah, I decided to do it this way because trying to get him up there requires a lot more effort than I am willing to admit.
James helped Thomas to each portal. He knew that eventually they'd find the others. Then he'd go back to being the weird one again. He decided to enjoy the time they had left.
Yeah, this works wonders. It's probably just a little bit faster to do it this way than the other way. Okay. Oh, there you go. This is probably just down here. Nice and easy.
This is a death tunnel, according to according to the file name. This is a cool one. I like this one. Basically, yeah, you have to use each character. It's a lot like the symmetrical level from before, but it's more asymmetric because of the movement of the pieces and the fact that there are safe zones you have to get the characters into. Otherwise, one will get killed while you're moving the other one. And it feels nice and it feels dramatic. Again, not something we can do too much in the game because people would get bored of it, but by doing this again, but with much more hazard, I think it feels kind of dramatic. The checkpoints here make this level far more fun, but pre-checkpoints, this level was absolutely awful because you get to the end piece with those kind of chomping pieces, and if you just got one character accidentally placed in the wrong place, you have to go back to the start of the entire game. This was one of the levels which kind of playtesters used to talk me into bothering to put checkpoints in. I'm very, very glad that they did because it's made the game a lot better. But yeah, it's cool. It's a nice, dangerous corridor. It's a good level.
Yeah, this is a lot easier with Thomas and James. Some natural reason.
And this is the payoff. So this is the moment where all of that stepping stone stuff is actually used for a mechanic. So you have to float the two characters on top of each other through an environment. Hopefully by this point you've already worked this out for yourself. I actually chickened out a little bit, so I spawned the characters in the position of being on top of each other, which was a bit of a wimpy move on my part. If you mess that up though, if you break it, if you immediately change your position, that stone, that notch on the side is there to kind of help you back in. But yeah, it's hopefully it's a culmination. It's the point where the player feels they've beaten the game. They've worked something out a bit quicker than the game was willing to show them, which I don't know how often that works, but it feels like the right time to introduce this mechanic in terms of actually having to force the player to do it. And yeah, it's interesting. The gravity thing started off as a bug. It started off that basically the two characters, because obviously on paper I was like, oh, Thomas would be cool if he could jump, and it would be cool if there was another character that jumped the wrong way, the anti-gravity thing. But I never actually worked out what would happen if the two landed on top of each other, and it was only then when I got these characters into the game and put them together, I jumped on top of each other and realised that they cancel each other out. It was very buggy, I had to tweak a few things, but it was really interesting and it made complete sense in a really weird kind of game logic-y way, which I liked. So I went with it. And I think it's fun. I think it kind of defines these levels quite nicely. I love double jumping.
I'm liking these levels.
It's nice. It adds a kind of a tactical choice element to jumping, which is quite cool. And that's why Sarah's
Awareness is a word that gets thrown around a lot.
in the game.
And a lot of people
To get one.
consider Thomas to have been created aware. Looking back at the logs, it seems that awareness only happened somewhere around the network connections spike. Cody Zimmerman, digital psychologist.
To introduce a new mechanic which changes the way the game's played. But also from a story point of view, she kind of is the reason that everything gets pushed towards the climax it does. That she's basically there as an agent, pushing the story forward, setting up the goals of the characters from that point on. And she's also epic.
Question. Okay, yes, okay. It's just that easy.
I really like the idea
You jump
of
tired.
putting a little bit of exploration into the game, so looking around and seeing what was going on. Obviously that's kind of hard to do in a puzzle platformer without the player kind of feeling like they've missed the point or got lost. And the idea of hunting for things became cool, and I had these switches, so I thought, okay, I'll make a level where you move around hunting down the switches and jumping on them in order to progress. And I made this level, but the problem is with the playtesters, they got lost. They got confused as to where they were meant to be going, what they were meant to be doing, and it frustrated people, and it didn't feel like a puzzle or a game level because it was so unguided and it just felt boring. The kind of the spotlight was a weird side effect. I'd made spotlights for another part of the game and then decided they weren't quite working and removed them. And this was a perfect opportunity to find a new use for a spotlight. So it's kind of moving around at the start of the level, it feels like an aesthetic thing, and you look around, and then once you realise it's tied into where the switches are, it becomes a waypoint system kind of for that one level, just at something to point you towards where you should be going. And you're still exploring a bit because you're working out your path to where you're trying to go to. There's a point where a switch appears on the bottom of the platform when you expect it to be on the top, things like that. But it kind of just guides the experience in a nice way.
The spotlight was a nice touch.
This puzzle here is about teaching the player to do something that's a bit counterintuitive. If you're not someone who's played many puzzle platformers, and to be fair, with some puzzle platformers this doesn't work, but something I really wanted Sarah to be able to do was this kind of slingshot move. So you would jump her in one direction and then use the double jump to push her back in the direction you came from. The idea being that you could kind of avoid an obstacle in midair, so you could jump around something. This is a really kind of, hopefully, a really kind of straightforward, blank canvas for you to try that move out of. It's kind of like the level where Chris is introduced for the first time. It's kind of quite a little amount of lighting, not a lot going on the screen. Hopefully it just gives you enough room to kind of come to that conclusion on your own. And it's quite fun when you see someone who's not maybe a big puzzle platformer game fan who sits down in front of this. The moment they work out the slingshot, they feel really good. They feel like they've worked out something, and it feels a little bit exploity as well, which I think people get a kick out of. So yeah, that's what this is. This is a setup for doing that later, basically. Sarah was probably the kind of the hardest character to write for, because she's kind of got this whole epic thing going on. She kind of feels, she should hopefully feel a bit Tolkien-esque, a bit kind of a bit like she's walked in from Game of Thrones. I kind of wanted her to feel aloof and different to the other characters in the scene, kind of sort of like Thor, I guess, in the Marvel comics, that she just sounds a bit off and a bit uncomfortable around everyone else as a result, but doesn't realise how weird she sounds. Getting that right was really hard. Making it so that didn't seem weird, or getting unintentional laughs from it was odd. I think most of the time we stay on just the right side, but so with this level, it's really about kind of targeting a space vertically. This is something that I've not required you to do before, and you can't really do without Sarah. There's a gap that you have to get through, which if you get it slightly wrong in either direction, you'll die. And it forces you to really think spatially about where that jump's placed, where you use that second jump in order to keep yourself out of harm's way. It's teaching the player to finesse. Hopefully, it's teaching them to play Sarah in a way that they actually think about where they're going, and they use that space and use the character's ability to get the perfect jump, to specifically achieve an objective. I don't force it on the player. This is a
I keep doing it. I keep actually cutting off his dialogue, but I like this guy. What he's doing is rather nice, teaching people about mechanics that will help them later on in other games as well as his own game. It's rather nice.
Weird one. This level is an excellent example of something very odd that happens. And I've talked to other indies, and it happens to most indies. When you're working in a studio, you're sat in a professional environment, an office, you're surrounded by pros, and you get the job done, and maybe you listen to music, but you just kind of get on with it. With Thomas, I built it at home, and I was sat next to my television at home on my computer, and I like background noise, so I'd put films on. And weirdly, this specific level I made while watching some obscure old Robert Downey Jr. movie. So for me, this level immediately, this is no insight on the game design, and I apologise for wasting your time, but this level always makes me think of Robert Downey Jr. And it's weird how those kind of, it's a weird phenomenon that indies, often like bits of games that we've worked on, will be coloured by whatever movie we had on or whatever TV show we had playing while we were working on that level. So this level for me is Robert Downey Jr.'s level. No insight at all on the game design there. Wasting your time.
It's kind of nice hearing the game developers' commentary. I wonder if more games have. Well, I know more games have it. I wonder what games have it. I'm gonna have to look it up.
So this is kind of the place where that balancing two characters on top of each other mechanic kind of gets made more complex. So you have a third character in it that you have to kind of factor in your choices, and you have to kind of carry one character across, switch, and take the other one back. You also can die to get the achievement there in the bottom corner, but it's really about just extrapolating on that concept that you learnt and mastered earlier, and just taking it off in a different direction, and this time with Sarah to make that a bit more interesting.
Real question is, how can I get him up here with no problem? Because it's not as easy as it looks, TBH. Can I make the gap? I cannot. Barely though. I know she can. Maybe if I... Oh, never mind. This works. Wonders. Almost. I was wondering how you get over here. It's like he needs to be slightly off the edge a little bit. A little bit more. I can't just... No, that's stupid. No, I can't do that. Do this. Just a little bit more. Off the edge. That's probably not what you're supposed to do. Actually, question. Am I overthinking this? Does she do what I think she does? Does she also balance out gravity, or no? Yes, she does. I'm not sure if he said that or not, but I'm just gonna assume now that everybody balances out his gravity to an extent, anyways. Because now I can just have him jump on him, or jump over. Boom. Have him jump down one, and then just move. Nice and easy, like. Let's not die, shall we? Didn't do too much to get over here. Have her go right there. There you go.
This is the Fountain of